We're ready.
Welcome all to today's informational webinar on the Transforming the Youth Justice System Breakthrough Series Collaborative. My name is Michael Lampierre, and I am the director of the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform at Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy. And on behalf of CJJR and the McCourt School of Public Policy and all of our partners, including the Center for Children's Law and Policy, I want to welcome you to today's session. We are so delighted to be able to offer this opportunity in the Breakthrough Series Collaborative to the youth serving field. In our view, there's not an issue that is more important than improving the lives of children and families all across this country. And during this time, when the challenges presented by the pandemic and by the ongoing racial injustice faced by communities of color are arguably more pronounced and recognized than ever, this effort becomes all the more timely, relevant, and critically needed. So thank you for your interest in joining us today to learn more about this opportunity. We're thrilled to talk with you more about what this Breakthrough Series Collaborative entails, how it's unique from other system transformation initiatives or efforts, and how we'll be conducting the application and selection process for the communities who are selected to participate in this effort. As we advance to the next slide, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge that this opportunity, this collaborative, could not take place without the generous support of Frank McCourt and his team and our partners at Georgetown University. And so we thank all of them for their generosity and for the support of this most important endeavor. Today's informational webinar is quite ambitious in terms of what we want to cover, so I want to keep things moving here. Here you see the agenda for today's session. We'll take a minute just to introduce all of our partners who are working collaboratively on this collaborative, the goals of the BSC and more details about what the BSC entails, including a really strong component involving youth and families and communities in driving the system transformation efforts. We'll talk more about the application process, the selection criteria, the timelines, and then we will have a dedicated time for your questions. We encourage you to submit those questions in the chat as we go along as well. On the next slide, just a few housekeeping items. You should be muted at this point, but if not, you can press *6 to do that. As I mentioned, we will be taking questions. Please send those in as we go along. We'll make sure to address as many as we can. For those of you who have colleagues who were unable to be with us, a couple of items. One, we are recording this session. And two, there will be another webinar where we present the similar information on Monday, July 12th from 3 to 4 Eastern. We'll also be posting FAQs on our BSC website, which you all should have. As we get going, it would be most helpful if you could start using the chat now by dropping in your name, your organization, your location, your city and state, and your email address in the chat box. We were really happy to see, in terms of registrations for this webinar and interest that we've received already, that folks all around the country are interested in this opportunity, and it's helpful from our perspective to know who's with us today. So please take a minute now to enter your name and your information in the chat box. That would be most appreciated. And then finally, if you do have questions even after this session, feel free to reach out to Macon Stewart, our Deputy Director for Multi-System Operations at Georgetown here at CJJR. Her email address is macon.stewart@georgetown.edu or Victoria Chamberlain at vac54@georgetown.edu. So with that, thanks again, folks, for being with us. We're excited you're here, and I'll turn it over to my partner, Mark Solar, to facilitate introductions.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to make this short because we have a lot of material to cover. Just want to introduce the 5 organizations that have come together to plan and implement the Breakthrough Series Collaborative. All of us are under the leadership of the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform, Michael Lampierre and his staff. Their names are listed there. I'm the executive director of the Center for Children's Law and Policy, and our staff are there. From the McCourt School, we have Gordon and Kate, who are the evaluators for the project. In addition, Casey Family Programs gives us Lyman lectors with a lot of experience in child welfare and race issues. And then Jen Augusti, who you will get to know very well. She's the guru of Breakthrough Series Collaboratives and has been our guiding star as we put all this together. I'm going to stop now because we have a lot of material to cover. Thank you all for coming and welcome. Next slide.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mark. This is Macon Stewart. I'm Deputy Director for Multi-Systems Operations. And today I'm just going to spend about 10 minutes giving you all a little bit of information about the goals of the collaborative and some of the things that we aim to do, as well as an example of what this work will look like for those communities that make application or accepted into the program. And so with that, we're going to talk a little bit about the goals of this work. Slide, please. So really our mission in this work is to transform the youth justice system by doing a couple of things. First of those is revising policies and practices that disproportionately impact young people of color that are within the youth justice system. And again, we use the word transform just because we know really there needs to be somewhat of an implosion in how the systems work. This, as Jen generally says to us, the systems are achieving the results that they are designed to do, that they are designed to receive. So our goal is to really get in there, understand what's happening, and begin to really change and shift the practices that exist within those systems. Next, one of the things that we aim to do in this work is create community-based supports. What we know is that young people fare better within the community and within their natural environments. So one of the things that we aim to do as a part of this work is really shore up how we work with communities and the role that communities play in supporting young people and families that are a part of the youth justice system. We also aim to, next line please, is enhance the alternatives that are provided to young people to really seek to avoid their involvement with the system. All of us who are a part of this work and have been working in systems for many years understand the abysmal outcomes that young people face when they are involved in our systems, and we know that community is the best place for them. And so therefore, we really hope to enhance our ability to keep young people in communities and shore up the services that are offered within the community setting. Next. So next we're getting to what the collaborative seeks to do. It seeks to identify and reduce, keep going, the racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic disparities for young people of color that are involved within the youth justice system, and improve the outcomes that young people and families have, as well as really enhance the communities. One of the things that really differs in this racial and ethnic disparities work from others is that there's really going to be a strong emphasis on the socioeconomic factor and building up capacities within communities to better support young people, not within the system, but external to the system for a variety of reasons. Next slide, please. So our focus here within this is on several things. You can go ahead and progress all the elements of this slide. Thank you. Is there a couple of things that we're going to really be looking at? I've already intimated them a little bit, but we're going to look at community. How do we build up community? What we know is that young people are best served within the context of their community, within their family or home or natural environments, and not within institutions or institutional type settings. And so again, this is where the socioeconomic factor really comes into play, in that we're going to try to really shore up community. And when we say community, we'll kind of talk about some of the folks who are a part of, that will be a part of the team's work in this. But when we think about community, what we really mean is thinking about grassroots organizations, not just our standard providers who are always contracting with the youth justice system organizations, but some of those organizations that we have not yet tapped into, that really have our boots on the ground within communities of color, really doing strong work around racial and ethnic disparities and really empowering communities and building up capacities. Also, one of the focal areas for this is the front end of the system. What we don't want to do is begin to look at the back end of the system, but we know if we can really impact who comes in, then that is going to impact the experiences throughout and reduce the number of young people that are even interfacing with the system. So this work really has a strong focus on community. How do we keep young people out of the system? Or when they hit the front door, what are those experiences like? Really safely reducing the number of young people that are entering the system. We all know that that'll impact them at other stages, because hopefully they will not get to those other stages. And what this also implies is just effective decision making and case planning, and really looking at how we treat young people and families. And for us, it's being crystal clear in that young people and families of color absolutely have very different experiences than their white counterparts. We need to understand why that is, what's happening, and really be about making change in that regard. Next slide, please. So the BSC is built on a framework. There are several components. I'm going to take just a few minutes here to kind of drill down into what these different components mean. And as communities that are a part of this work, there is an expectation that you will be addressing each of these components in some way. And so the framework, or what we will be calling in the collaborative, the change package, deals with all of these things in some way. And so as a part of this, you'll be looking at this. Component number one is ensuring racial justice, fairness, and equity at all levels of the youth justice system. So what we want to do is ensure that we are creating and supporting continuous opportunities to share valuable insight about what young people and also our partners are experiencing as a part of this, and that we're really using that information to shore up and, number one, define anti-racist values that advance racial and ethnic justice, and incorporate those values into our system, policies, practices, and approaches. And one thing that we have to really be in doing this work is transparent about the experiences that young people and families are having within these systems, and understand that this isn't personal. These are systems. They are functioning the way that they were designed to, but it really is incumbent upon us to deal with those realities of how white supremacy and other things are impacting young people and families that are a part of these, recognize the disadvantages and disparities that young people and families of color are facing when they interact with these systems, and really roll up our sleeves and do some work to help mitigate some of that. Also, what this component will get into is cultural humility and racial awareness, which includes actively promoting awareness and reflection about biases, shifts in power, racism, and other things relative to privilege that may be impacting the relationships and interactions and decisions that are occurring at all levels within our system. Component two deals with partnership and how we partner with young people and families in strength-based ways that reflect shared power. One of the things that we have to acknowledge is that there's been a lot of trauma that young people and families have experienced as a result of their involvement with youth justice systems, adult justice systems, and other systems alike over just generations. And so those are things that we have to come to terms with and use that as a mechanism for changing, and really make sure that we're being transparent about how we want to change, what we're going to do, and that we're partnering with young people and families, not just to have them as placeholders at the table when we're doing this work, but that we're having meaningful engagement, that we're listening to their voices, that they are equal members in this work. And you'll hear a little bit more about how that will play out in some of the other parts of the presentation today. Component number three is investing in community to promote capacity building and community-led sustainable transformation. That is a mouthful. So what this is really about is us investing in communities and building on the strengths that our communities have, understanding the culture and understand what that means for young people and families that we serve, being respectful of their culture, engaging in radical healing, really confirming their identity and affirmations, thinking about how we acknowledge and reconcile and strive to repair the legacy of historical and institutional racism that has occurred within these systems, while also acknowledging some of the partnership and shifts that we want to make in how we serve young people and families. Really, this is about us just being open and honest about how our system functions, and creating a system that shares power with the community and with those consumers that we are serving to shift how we, not only how we're seen, but how we're serving and how we can meaningfully partner with young people and families to achieve better outcomes. Next slide, please. Component number 4 gets into collaboration, and it focuses on collaboration and coordination across systems and communities. What we know is that there are many systems that serve as feeders into the youth justice system, and so part of what we want to do is understand what those systems are and be open and transparent about how we're collaborating and working together from a multi-systems perspective to better support young people and families. And so this will include things like sharing a vision with those agencies around how we support young people and families, and again, employing those other feeder systems to really engage in this reconciliation process, being transparent, being open, and understanding just the history that has existed and why youth and families kind of come with a level of apprehension when we engage with them, but also being clear and consistent across our systems with how we work with young people and families, and being transparent and fair in all that we say and do. Component number 5 gets into our workforce, ensuring that we are employing a stable, skilled and anti-racist workforce that can best support young people and families. And so, there are a number of different things that we will support communities in engaging in and doing this work. This has to do with things like establishing and recruiting a skilled workforce that is reflective of the consumers that our organizations are serving, and that our workforce is reflective not just at the direct services level, but that we also have things in place that are helping to promote the frontline workforce to move up in leadership. Oftentimes what we see in communities is that there may be our direct service staff to some degree may reflect the young people and families that we're serving, but once we get into mid-level and upper management, then the hues change a bit. So we want to make sure that there are equal opportunities for everyone to succeed and move up. But then also providing very intentional professional development opportunities and opportunities to recruit staff of color within the organization. The last component is component 6, which is seeks to promote positive interactions with youth and their families at initial contact, decision, and during all of this decision-making practices within our youth justice system. And so this really gets into that direct experience that a young person and family has whenever they interface with our system. Again, how do we really ensure that our staff are using developmentally appropriate, healing-centered, skill-focused approaches when they're working with young people and families? How are we integrating that and supporting community-based organizations to do the same? And how are we creating those alliances and partnerships and having clear policies around some of those things, and not just policies, but also practices? Next slide, please. And so the next slide is just going to be just a really quick example of what the BSC work looks like. And then you'll hear a lot more from Jen, who's going to come up next after me. So this example gives a community that we had worked with previously that had they had a lot of young people of color that were exiting juvenile justice placement and were experiencing significant delays in school enrollment. And the thing that I personally like about the BSC, having been a part of a team that was that implemented the BSC methodology and now on the program side, is that it allows you to take those things that you think about as a worker or a supervisor or family member, those thoughts that you have about, if I could do this one thing and change the system, it could be better. It allows you to take that and that practice and actually implement the change on one young person or one family. And so in this example, this community had a lot of young people who were exiting without being connected, without being enrolled in school. And so they were experiencing significant delays in school enrollment. And so someone had the foresight to say, you know what, let's start doing education planning earlier on prior to discharge from the facility. And they would also connect the young person with the school that they were going to be enrolled in so that they could start receiving work, transferring records, etc. And what happened is young people didn't have those delays. They were connected to their school prior to exit. They started doing some of the work before they were even released from that facility. And so there was a better transition. And so again, The premise of the BSC, and Jen is going to talk about this, is I have an idea. It's not anything that's harmful. It's something that can enhance what we do. Let me test it out. I may be a young person, I may be a family member, or I may be a line staff. I am empowered to make change in a very different way. And so again, thank you all for your participation. I'm going to transition it over to Jen to talk a little bit more about the methodology.
Thanks, Megan. And so, hi everyone, my name's Jen Agosti, and I'm no guru, although Mark used that term. I am just a person who's done a lot of breakthrough series collaboratives over the years. And so what I want to is different from other initiatives, programs, projects, training efforts that you might have been involved in, because it's a different sort of animal, if you will. And we just want to make sure that people are as clear as possible going in before you apply that your expectations. So Megan started out by using the language of every system is perfectly designed to achieve exactly the results it gets. So there are sort of 4 mantras that we often use in breakthrough series collaboratives. Next slide. And the first one is this one, right? Every system is perfectly designed to achieve exactly the results it gets. And what that is to say is that it's not about doing training. It's not about training people, believing that people are the problem. It's about going in with this idea that people come to this work to do their best work, and then they hit the system. And so it's a system that we're actually focused on changing. The second mantra is around collaboration, and this is why we don't use a technical sort of assistance approach. We don't deploy technical assistance providers and do a lot of one-on-one consultation. Instead, we believe that we sort of know you will learn as much from the other teams in the collaborative as you will from any of us or from the instructors. That we want to create this, and I'll talk about this facilitated learning environment, such that you, jurisdictions participating, will be talking to your peers in other places across the country to really better understand what's working for them, where your challenge is similar, and what can be different, what could be done. The notion of all improvement requires change, but not all changes lead to improvement is anchored in our reliance on data for improvement. This isn't data for research. This is really, how do you know things are getting better? Who's better off? How do you know? And so some is quantitative, some is qualitative, but it's not a sort of a pre and a post sort of dynamic. It's every time, every month you're looking and saying, are the changes that we've made making anything better off? And the last thing is this notion of bridging the gap between what we know and what we do. And I think so much of my work with, Tiana and Mark and Jason and Megan and Michael and Shay and all that we've learned and all that they know. And what a breakthrough series allows us to do is to say, we know what it would take for things to get better. The challenge is how. How do we do it in our particular system, jurisdiction, area? And that's what a breakthrough series strives to do. And so the next slide, the way we think about this is we really think about this as a very action-focused methodology. We take not just training, but knowledge, skills, and we immediately move to action. So when we talk about who's going to be on your team, which we will talk about, we believe that it's those folks who are really close to their work who know what the practice needs to look like. They know what those sort of operational barriers are to the best laid policies. And so what we believe, and why we call this system or culture transformation, is that we believe if we change not just our beliefs, which is our knowledge, but we also can change our behaviors and our practices, and then we scaffold that with our policies and our laws, that's actually what drives the changes and outcomes. Next slide, Victoria. So the way I always think about breakthrough series, people always say, like, what's the secret sauce? Why is the, how can the whole be greater than the sum of the parts? And it's because we use 3 very distinct notions. And this is in addition to the content that we use. We think a lot about continuous quality improvement, which are small tests of change. It's this very, and I'm going to give an example. Macon led us off, and I think that was a bit of a teaser around having an idea, testing it quickly, right? We blend that with the best that we know from implementation science. So how do we then get from an improved practice to something that's going to be a sustainable change, that something is going to be moved to scale, spread across multiple people, multiple units, multiple jurisdictions, right, in ways that are going to sustain it? What do we know about implementation science? And how do we draw upon relational dynamics, as I like to say? And to me, this is a way that we start to really tap into racial justice, in fact, by understanding the importance of relationships, relational dynamics of change, spreading things in a really natural way. And when you put those things together, one more click, that's actually what gets us to the system transformation. Because when we bring all these things together, we're actually not just changing knowledge, and we're not just changing hearts and minds or behaviors, we're actually transforming systems. And it sounds a little magical. You have to suspend your disbelief up front, but that's what we've seen happen in collaborative over collaborative for the last roughly 20 years in human services. Next slide. And by the way, this will be the fastest course on Breakthrough Series Collaboratives you'll ever get. Those people who actually participate will do this in a much more methodical way to make sure that at least some of it's sticking. But we wanted to, again, give you a flavor. So when I talk about Breakthrough Series Collaboratives, I always think about 5 key things. I think about the fact that we have these multi-level teams. These are not teams that are just high-level managers. These are teams that have a variety of perspectives and expertise, that are anchored in a single jurisdiction, but that actually bring all of this expertise, including our lived system expertise and our direct line staff, into the room, not just to guide change, but to drive and to test change. You'll be led by a lot of content experts and coaches and instructors and planning team members who also bring this varied expertise and perspectives that might look a lot like your teams themselves. And they'll be sort of not just your, say, the sage on the stage, not just your teachers, but your guides by the side, right? The coaches, the people who will be able to give you some kind of expertise that'll do a lot of facilitation across teams. And they're part of this process all the way through. I mentioned up front that shared learning environment, and that is a highly facilitated environment where we'll have an online sort of collaborative platform. We often use something like Basecamp for those who are familiar with that. We'll do a lot of calls, and those calls will be across teams. There'll be what we call affinity groups. So people from each team who sit in similar chairs will actually get to come together across teams pretty regularly to share sort of their agency of change and what they can be doing. And what Megan listed out, those 6 components, those 6 drivers or elements, are all what we refer to as the collaborative change framework. So as you were listening, if what you were doing is thinking, oh, I really want to focus on that one, the good news and the bad news is actually you're going to get to focus on all 6 over the course of the collaborative. It won't be sequential. Every team will not start in the same place. We know that you will actually do some changes that cross over multiple domains. That's the point. But what we believe in, having crafted that change framework, which came out of an expert meeting that looked much like the multi-level inclusive teams, you'll be actually, anchoring your work using touchstones to say, are we touching this part of the system yet? And then the model for improvement, which I'm going to actually unpack just a little bit, that's that quality improvement. When I mentioned process improvement and CQI, we use in Breakthrough Series Collaboratives this thing called the model for improvement. And again, because I'm going to give an example, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it's a way that we get into this very rapid cycle, rapid pace of change, rather than rapid, not rapid, very slow process of just planning. So next slide. So here's what teams do, and I'm going to try to avoid reading everything in the next few slides, but I want to let you know that when you come into a breakthrough series, there's a lot of facilitated activities. A lot of it will be around first building your team in order for you to be able to test and then roll your ideas, your successful strategies towards implementation. You'll be making sure regularly using data that your changes are resulting in improvements. You'll be tapping into that relational dynamic by bringing in others, serving as champions and ambassadors. As you develop these networks across teams through this collaborative shared learning environment, we hope that it actually elevates a lot of these issues nationally. And then we collectively, as you all and we all become leaders in this work, we're really thinking about scaling up and spreading and planning for sustainability in your individual jurisdictions, but also really lending your expertise at this leading edge to the work as a whole, hopefully generating sort of this groundswell so that others across the country will be able to learn from you. So that's sort of the high level. What on the next slide is where I actually want to talk about this model for improvement. And here's what it might look like. So Megan gave you that broad example. Here's what it might look really specifically. So if you start and you're thinking about the domains and you're thinking, we really need to do a better job in partnering with youth and families in ways that reflect power, right? And this is now tapping right into that change framework. You then as a team say, okay, well, how are we going to know what changes and improvement? What are some of the metrics or data points we can look at? Some are going to be numbers and quantitative, others might be more qualitative. Staff will support you a lot in what you're looking at, but you'll be looking at those pretty regularly. but almost immediately you will get down into the weeds. And rather than going through a long planning process of saying, okay, how are we going to create a policy to do a better job of this? What you're going to do is say, what can we test by next Tuesday? And someone on the team, maybe the young person would say, it would be really great if someone ever just asked me directly about what my hopes for the future are. And we would then say, try it out. Try it with one youth by next Tuesday. Test that, practice that strategy out. And then again, we'll give you a lot of coaching of how do you get from testing it with one young person or with one family to a practice that can ultimately be sustained. But that's just a really small example of how the work looks. And again, the pace that we get really excited about in these Breakthrough Series collaboratives. Next slide. So some of the things, and you probably hear this in the way that I talk about it, some of the reasons that I love using Breakthrough Series for system transformation work is that, one, it includes the voices and amplifies, not just includes, but amplifies the voices of the people who are most impacted by the work. And that means folks, young people and family members with lived experience, and those direct line workers who are actually working on staff, not workers, staff in various places, who are actually interacting with young people and families and communities every day. Our community partners, as Macon said, are people who are impacted by this every day, and they are not just at the table, but they are actually testing changes. We also are constantly facilitating successes and learnings. So if we have one team from a jurisdiction, in the West Coast, there's no reason the folks in the South can't be learning from that success and learning at the same time. If we have a tribal team that's done something really exciting, there's no reason that a big metropolitan city can't be learning from that in real time. And so this real-time pace means that we don't have to wait for a lot of consensus or permission, but we're doing this real-time sharing and learning. At the same time, we're not getting sort of sidetracked by the flavor of the day, because everything we do is anchored in your team priorities, which is built upon that change framework. So we all in this collaborative will have common language, common themes, maybe some different priorities, but all focused on that same touchstone. As we focus on action, it means it's not just always about new knowledge or analysis paralysis. We need more data before we can move forward. We are focused on changes in real time quickly. We have young people in our systems today who deserve better. And that is the frame that we always use in this work. And that helps us to get away from this, like, how many meetings we have to have before we can do something differently. It gets us out of meeting rooms and into or off Zoom these days, and into actually real spaces where it can affect change. And as we're using measurement for learning, it's building this culture of knowing that we have to make sure that the people we need to be better off, in this case, our young people of color, are actually better off as a result of this work. I think this is coming down. I'm winding down, which is good because I'm watching the clock. And so the next slide, as you're sitting and thinking like, okay, this is different than what I'm used to, maybe different what I've heard in the past. What do we need to be successful? So in my 20 years or so of doing Breakthrough Series, here are just some of the observations I've made of teams that end up being what I would call successful in a Breakthrough Series. They've got to have passion. And this is not work, right, for the weak-hearted, right, or the dabble around the edges. This is, we're jumping right into the deep end, and we are going to be talking about racism and white supremacy culture and biases and transformation. So we're going to want you right with us. We want people who are creative, right, who aren't going to be stuck on, oh, but this is the way we've always done things, or can we do that, doesn't policy say? Now, we're not suggesting that you just immediately discard policy and legislation. That is not my message, but we do want you to be creative and think about, that box that we live in is actually bigger than we sometimes expect and know. We want you to be opinion leaders. So folks who are willing to put your stake in the ground, and people are listening and watching and are going to follow you. You're open to new ideas. So when you hear someone from another team say something, your initial reaction isn't a yes, but that could never happen here. Your initial reaction is, wow, and how can we try that here, right? We want you to have some history of adaptation, of change. We want you to be doers, right? People who are excited to just try, and not feel really, really, limited by how much planning you have to do. I always say perfection is the enemy of the better. And we can work towards perfection, but let's in the meantime keep making things better. And then we really want these last two around, we want you to be folks who know when it's your turn to talk, but honor when it's your turn to listen, and that you're actively listening for those experiences, that expertise that is coming from people who have direct experience in our systems. We want you to listen and be challenged and open and welcome the challenge of, again, how we can make the system better, how we can transform from those who know it best. So that is I know that was a lot. I know I spoke quickly. That is sadly part of what I do, but I want to actually lead that into what Tiana is going to now tell you more about. Okay, so you've heard all of this so far. You have a concept, a general idea of the content, a general, maybe very superficial idea of what in the world a Breakthrough Series Collaborative is. And now you're wondering, like, should I apply? Should we apply? And Tiana is going to take you through a little bit about what that looks like.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jen. My name is Tiana Davis. I'm with the Center for Children's Law and Policy. And just as we pick up where Jen left off, I am hoping that at this point, everyone is asking, should we apply? And I hope that that answer is yes. Are you committed to transforming the ways that the youth justice system operationalizes racial oppression and or supports or props up white supremacy? Then yes, you should apply. Are you invested in the well-being of youth, families, and communities of color in your community? Then absolutely yes, you should apply. If we could move to the next slide, please. And if your goals are aligned with the values that have been articulated here, if you're interested in doing something differently, because I know that many jurisdictions have tackled this issue and have not met with the outcomes that they had hoped. And so this is a new opportunity, it's a different opportunity, and we're really hoping to have a robust set of applicants who are interested in participating in this project. One thing I should say is that the BSC really prioritizes inclusion. So as you heard others say before me, we really want to be inclusive and engage in true partnership with a broad range of stakeholders, including communities of color, including youth and families with lived experience in the system. We also want to be really inclusive about who we're pulling in from the system, looking at youth justice system leaders at every level, from the policy-making level all the way to the line level. So it really is an inclusive process that is focused on action. And so if that sounds like something that would be helpful in supporting your jurisdiction in moving toward greater equity in the system and dismantling what we know to be racist systems, then we hope to receive an application from you during this open application period. So if we could go to the next slide, there are many considerations that you should take into, that you should contemplate as you consider whether or not you will complete an application. One of them obviously is the cost. That each team is expected to come to the table with an investment of $20,000 per team. And what is being offered here through this BSC, significant resources, opportunities for support and guidance, opportunities to connect with like-minded individuals all across the country. This really is a tremendous way to get some bang for the buck. And this opportunity is again made possible by the McCourt family and their generous investment in this initiative. Again, there's an opportunity for real learning and for change. We're not interested in more talk. I hear that so much, so many times and in so many places across the country. We've been talking about racial equity for 20 years. When are we going to get to the work? And we believe that this BSC methodology, as well as the core components of the collaborative change process, are really create a real opportunity for jurisdictions to move toward a greater impact in this area. We had the opportunity for individuals to participate in the certificate program, the learning sessions, as well as all of the collaboration that's going to happen on our collaboration platform that everyone will have access to. There'll be lots of resources available. So we're really excited and think that this will be a very robust opportunity to engage in transformation of your local justice system. One thing that we wanted to raise, there are many possible funding sources that you might think about tapping into as you consider how to raise this $20,000. Of course, there's an opportunity for each of your stakeholder agencies and organizations to contribute some portion of that. We recommend looking to training dollars potentially, or possibly even your state or local youth justice dollars. There are many national and local and regional foundations that would be very interested in potentially supporting your team's application to participate in the BSC. And we want to just offer that if teams are experiencing some struggles trying to think about how to raise these funds, please feel free to reach out to us. So we're happy to brainstorm with you some potential opportunities that you might tap into to raise the funds needed to participate in this initiative. Next slide, please. So we wanted to just talk a little bit about your what we're calling the BSC Transformation Partnership. So again, this is an inclusive process that we hope that each of the jurisdictions that apply will bring to the table a robust and diverse group of stakeholders who are going to be responsible for developing and implementing the strategies that come out of your work in the BSC. So once you've decided to apply, you'll need to build your transformation team. Each BSC Transformation Partnership will be comprised of a core team that you see represented here with the purple circle, and the extended team, which is the larger, I guess that's a aquamarine color, circle on the outside. In this structure, this slide, what we really want to highlight here is that the core team is set to be up to 9 individuals, 9 stakeholders. And within that core team, among those 9 members of the core team, you'll have a day-to-day manager and 2 core team or co-leaders for the core team. And so those 9 individuals will really drive the bus of your work in the BSC. And the extended team is your extended group of players that you want to bring to the table that are really going to help to reinforce the work that's happening in the core team and ensure that it's brought to scale as necessary and is sustained. So if we move to the next slide, we'll just take a look at some of the roles that have been identified. So the day-to-day manager, who is one of the 9 members of the core team, will oversee and support the activities of both the core team and the extended team. The day-to-day manager will take responsibility for planning, documenting, and adjusting the tests of change, the rapid tests of change that we heard about earlier. They'll manage metrics, coordinate key activities of the transformation partnership, and very importantly, communicate the successes that should be spread. We anticipate that the day-to-day manager will spend 5 to 10% of their work time during the BSC implementation. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And again, if we think back to that diagram, we have the 2 co-senior leaders who will be a part of that core team. So that's 2 members of the 9 that we referenced earlier as parts of the core team. And each of these, there's 2 sort of different roles that we would like for teams to consider in selecting their co-senior leaders. So the first senior leader really should represent youth, family, or community who have lived experience with the system, or who are deeply connected or rooted in communities of color that the system serves. So we really want this community leader to bring a perspective of communities of color and or lived experience within the system. And their counterpart, the system senior leader or senior co-leader, should have high-level operational authority within the system to make policy, practice, and reform decisions at the front end of the system. So we really want there to be some equity in the way that the group is led, and we believe that this structure helps to move us in that direction. And these individuals really should demonstrate the leadership commitment to racial equity and to system transformation. And they will again provide that core leadership to the overall partnership. And we see here again an expectation of about 2 to 5% of work time for those two individuals. Next slide, please. And so as we talk about, now those are the 3 named members of the core team. So now we want to talk a little bit about the other members of the core team, the other 6. So we have 9 members who represent the diversity of the system and community that is served by the justice system in your area. The core team should reflect the racial, ethnic, gender, and other diversities, other elements of diversity that are important to within your community. So again, we want to be inclusive in how we're thinking about these team members and make sure that it really is a representation of who we are as a community. The core team will actively participate in the BSC by representing the team at the certificate program and the subsequent in-person learning sessions. And of course, they would participate in all of the collaborative work of the BSC partnership. And again, we see here it's about a 2 to 5% work time commitment for each of the core team members. Next slide, please. And so we know that communities are often unique in their administrative structures or their leadership roles and in the types of services and programs that they provide. So as we've offered some guidance for you all to, as you contemplate who would be on your core team, and we've outlined these by roles rather than by individual or particular personnel types. So you'll see here in this, this table is a part of the application packet. So feel free to reference that as you do the work of building your team. But we see here we have a couple of key roles that we want to make sure are represented on your team. Again, person with lived system experience, at least one we know will be the one of the co-senior leaders, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't leverage another opportunity to include a youth or family member or person with prior justice experience, because you have 2 opportunities to include a person with lived system experience. A youth justice system representative. Here, you might look to a person who's in leadership in youth justice, a direct line staff in youth justice, and a representative from local law enforcement. So those are 3 key areas that we want to make sure are represented. And then you have 2 opportunities to choose a youth justice leader, ideally as you sort of pull together your team, and 1 opportunity for direct line staff and a representative from law enforcement. The third area is community partners, which again, of course, we want to make sure that we're casting a broad net in how we're thinking about communities and the organizations that serve them. They may not be the organizations that have typically served in these roles for your youth justice system, but we want to be, again, as inclusive as we possibly can. Organizations that provide youth with pro-social or youth development opportunities should represent one of those community partners. And then potentially community partner like a foundation or a fundraising body that can offer some support engage in development that can support the work of the BSC partnership. And finally, the interconnected system partner is a member who, as I think Macon referenced earlier, those systems that we know to be that are often feeder systems for the youth justice system, child welfare, schools, behavioral or mental health, that you want to reach to those systems based on your what your data suggests, who's coming into contact with the system, and where there's an opportunity to transform the response in a way that keeps young people out of the system and refers them back and keeps them into those programs and services that we know are more helpful and supportive for them as young people. So again, you have 1 to 2 opportunities here to build up those roles on your team. Next slide. And then finally, the extended team is it's the team's opportunity to tap into a broader cast of players, resources, individuals that you think are necessary to transform your local system. The extended team is really intended to amplify and expand the work of the core team and ensure sustainability of the work of the BSC. This extended team is something that will be developed over time through an iterative process that really follows along with the work that your team has set out for itself. So this is your team, the support team that's really going to help with implementation and expansion as appropriate. So you have opportunity there to build that team as needed to support the work. And again, we have about a 2 to 5% of work time expectation for the extended team. Next slide, please. And here you see, it won't read all of this, but there's opportunities to bring in, again, a broader cast of stakeholders, youth and families, direct service staff, more law enforcement, community partners, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, just a broad swath of stakeholders who have a real stake in the youth justice system and what happens, and can really offer resources and guidance in how to move toward greater equity in the justice system, and as we sort of dismantle these structures that have oppressed for so long. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up here, we have our application. Once you form your team, you will also find the application online. We recommend that each jurisdiction pull together the team of the senior leaders and the core team members to review the application, pull together all of the information that you will need in order to complete the application. We will accept up to a 20-page application that should be submitted as an email attachment to jjreform@georgetown.edu by midnight on August 20th, 2021. And that would be in reference to your local time zone. And I added a little note, submit by 11:59 on August 19th, because that I would glance at the, we don't want anybody to glance at the application deadline and think you have another day. So it really should be by 11:59 on August 19th, just for clarity. Next slide, please. And so just real quickly, the selection criteria, we're really looking for teams to put their best foot forward in defining and describing their understanding of structural and systemic racism in the youth justice system and how those elements contribute to the disparities that we see, how we know those systems do exactly what they are intended and designed to do. We want to see a commitment to promoting and practicing anti-racism. Again, it's less about talk and more about doing, and that's really what we are hoping to see from our applicants, a commitment to action. The leadership core team and the capacity needed to make the policy and practice changes that the team identifies. Like we really need to know that the folks who are coming to the table are the folks who are best positioned to do the work and inform the work and to collaborate in a way that makes the outcomes we're seeking a reality. And again, can't emphasize enough the commitment to testing changes rapidly and really committing to taking action. Finally, again, it's critically important that this process is inclusive, and there has to be a commitment demonstrated in your application that there, commitment to partnering with youth and families of color. Though these are the folks with the greatest stake in what happens in these systems, and we have to be sure that we're making our best effort to be inclusive and to share in the power and responsibility of building a system that works for everybody and that really hopefully transforms our thinking about public safety. Next slide, please. And finally, just say a few words about the selection process. We are hoping to CJJR, CCLP, and our consultant team will review the applications. There will be a finalist team interview for the selected finalist teams. We have set aside the dates September 15th and 16th for interviews to occur. All core members will be expected to attend those, and so we recommend that any team that applies should reserve those dates now so that you will have some flexibility for joining that interview. Next slide, please. And now we're going to move to a conversation about the timeline.
Hi, sorry, I am Amber, but my webcam does not work, so I'm going to stay off of camera. But here's a recap. Next slide, thank you. We're going to recap the application timeline on this slide. I won't go over everything since my colleagues have already mentioned the key dates, but I want to highlight a few additional events. First, we're hosting informal office hours for interested communities to ask any questions. You don't need to register for these, just pop in using the Zoom link on our website under the BSC application process tab. And these office hours are June 24th from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, July 8th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and August 3rd from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. All the details are they're on our website, so feel free to just hop on. And the Zoom link is also in there. We also have our second information webinar on July 12th at 3 p.m. As Michael mentioned at the beginning. If your colleagues couldn't make it today, or if you have additional people who might be interested. And if you are interested in applying to the program, you may want to submit an interested applicants form by July 19th. This will allow you to receive reminders and follow-ups regarding the application timeline. Let's see, and Tiana has gone through the application due date. It's technically August 19th at 11:59 p.m. your local time zone. You'll hear back from us around early September about the first round of acceptance. And then we will notify you via email on October 12th for the final final teams that got selected. Next. And if you are selected, there are a few dates that we want you to keep in mind. On October 26th, we have an orientation webinar for the teams, and also all the core team members must register by 5 p.m. Eastern Time on that date. The registration will be online via Submittable, and then the certificate program will be held at the end of April from the 25th to the 29th. It's going to be in Washington, D.C., and all core team members are required to attend the entire program. And then afterwards, we also have 3 in-person learning sessions. These are most likely going to be one day. We will work with the selected jurisdictions to plan for these dates to make sure that all core team members can attend. And then that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Macon. We have only 1 minute for Q&A.
Thank you, Amber. I have attempted to respond to most of the questions in the question and answer pod as they have come in. I think I've gotten most of them. For those of you that had questions that I was not able to address, I would just ask that you all reach out to me directly, at Macon, MACON.Stewart, STEWART, at georgetown.edu. And we will respond for those questions that were taken. We will post those on our website in the FAQs, but I did try to respond to those. Just so you know, everyone who is registered and attended will receive the recording, will receive the link for the recording, and also there's another session. So thank you all again for your participation. We look forward to hearing from you with any questions you may have, and also receiving your applications by midnight on August 20th. Thank you all so much.